Hello and welcome to OPM Connect. Of course, it's a program that gives you an insight into government's plans, policies, and programs. I'm Naomi Francis. Well, today we have a discussion in store for you like no other. A dream team, in fact, here to discuss with us the development of Port Royal into a cruise ship destination. And last week we saw where we welcomed the historic docking of the first cruise ship in Port Royal. Today we're pleased to have on set with us the President and CEO of the Port Authority of Jamaica, Professor Gordon Shirley, as well as Ms. Heather Pinnock, the General Manager of the Urban Development Corporation, critical component in terms of a state agency in that regard with Port Royal, and of course none other than Mr. William Tatham, the Vice President of Cruise, Shipping and Marina Operations at the Port Authority of Jamaica. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and may I congratulate all of you for a wonderful, last week almost went glitch-free in terms of Jamaica and Kingston in particular receiving the first cruise ship docking in Port Royal. So congratulations to the team. Prof, let me start with you though, in terms of what were the almost issues that led up to the ship being docked in Port Royal?
Well, Naomi, about 2.5 years ago, the Prime Minister asked us to work on getting cruise shipping back into Kingston. This came on the heels of two visits by two cruise ships,
yes,
which were docked at Kingston wharves, and they went very well. And the Prime Minister said it's now time for us to get cruise shipping back into Kingston. And it's a long story, but we recognized that Port Royal was the very best place to try to do this. It had a number of technical challenges, but we felt we could deal with those technical challenges, and we were able to do that, and we're delighted that in the 2-year period we have been able to solve those and to bring cruise shipping back to Kingston.
Indeed, but help us with the backstory, because it's very important that the nation understands really what it took to get to this point.
So let's start with a couple of things. One, William and others have been working for some time with the cruise lines to understand how we could get cruise shipping to Kingston. This is before the Prime Minister made that request, because Kingston is the cultural center of the Caribbean.
Indeed.
For a variety of reasons, the cruise ships find Kingston a difficult place. A part of it relates to the itineraries and the length of time it takes to get here. But some of it is also related to the kind of reputation that Kingston has as a difficult, tough kind of city.
Yes.
This in spite of the wealth of riches that we have in terms of culture and our capacity as a town. We knew, however, that Port Royal was a much more favorable destination for them. Port Royal has its own cachet. It's known internationally. Yes. It has the aura of the pirates, the military, the navy, and so on. And it is almost crime-free. It has a pristine reputation in that regard. But Port Royal would have had a number of challenges. One, it is such an archaeologically rich place. We have to be very sensitive about whatever we do there. Environmentally, it is also very sensitive. So we had to re-examine where is it that we would locate a berth.
Yes.
The older studies had suggested a berth very close to an area called Chocolate Hole, which is very close to the sunken city. Any cruise ship coming in there would do some damage to the sunken city, and trying to build a berth there would be, today, given environmental standards today, would be unacceptable.
Yes.
But we decided to go to the old coal wharf, which for over 300 years had been a naval dockyard, and it had operated as a port. Even after the British left, it was used to store the aggregate, which was used for the Palisades runway.
Yes.
So that area proved to be an ideal area. For one, it was out of the zone of all of the major archaeological assets. Two, it is a very sheltered environment which allowed us to exploit a new technology which had been developed, which is called the Seawalk. It's rather than the traditional berthing system, this is like a jet bridge at an airport.
Almost revolutionary, really, when it was announced by the Prime Minister.
Yes, it was, and it is the first in the hemisphere.
Yes.
We are the first port to use it in the hemisphere. It has been used in a a few ports in Europe in fjords and very environmentally sensitive areas.
Yes.
But it worked like a charm here in Port Royal.
Indeed. Indeed. You know, Doc, you really touched on so many areas in terms of the rich history of Port Royal. I want to get back to that shortly, but UDC played a critical role in terms of helping to transform the town of Port Royal, certainly ahead of, and continues to work to ensure that both residents and visitors are comfortable. Talk to us, Heather Pinnock, I beg your pardon, about that role that UDC plays.
So UDC has been involved in Port Royal for quite some time. As Prof said, there have been a number of plans and considerations for Port Royal for over 40 years. But before, even in the previous plans, there had been the issues of addressing all of the specialness of Port Royal. Port Royal is very unique. Apart from the heritage, there is the environmental. So we are looking at the heritage assets, and it is already protected by the National Heritage Trust. But there are also environmental assets that we need to consider, and it is indeed the Port Royal and Palisades area is considered an international wetland of importance by the Ramsar Committee. And so all of those things have to come together in looking at the planning. So when we went back again to treat with the community, it was very important that we spent a lot of time understanding what was done before and how to take the best of what was done before and to bring that into today. So some of the things really are environmental concerns and of course social concerns. I mean, the three pillars of it being sustainable is that it be economically, socially and environmentally. So we have dubbed the project a sustainable development project because all those elements are very important. And a key part of that has been working with the community. Again, we have a little bit of exhaustion in the community. Some of them said, boy, we're tired of being consulted.
And it wouldn't have worked and all those things.
And it is, I really think this is a big testament to just anybody doing anything, that if you tried and tried and tried, it didn't work, sometimes it's important to just try one more time and then you get your success. So in this instance, we have had a bit of disbelief from the community. They're like, oh, we've heard this before, we've done all of this before, but we said, the difference this time is a port is being built. And we, over the months that the port was being built, as we had the conversations with the community, we said, see, it's actually happening. And so really last week, Monday, was a big win for us because we're nowhere near finished the work that needs to be done in the community, but this is such an important start. And to see the port done, to see the ship arrive. I mean, even up to the weekend before, we were in the town talking with the community about ship day. We're like, what to expect on ship day. And people are like, so, will we be able to see it? What would it be like? People had a lot of questions. And there still seemed to be some amount of disbelief that a ship was actually going to come. And so we were there in the town on Monday, and people were really just amazed. And I think it is important, it's kind of like it's proof that we are really doing this. All of these elements that we've been talking about for some time are coming together, that a solution has been found. We spent some time showing them the seawalk on the videos as well. And they were really fascinated because they had been involved in the processes before, and so they were like, what's going to be different this time? So really the seawalk, we explained, is one of the big differences. The ship has come now, so really now we really need to get into detailed work with the community about how did it go, what are the opportunities, and what are the other things we have to do. So again, UDC as we have two main roles. We're doing the master planning, which is the formal process of doing planning for a town, but we're also coordinating the efforts of the other government agencies. So everything involving in infrastructure, through to housing, through the economic opportunities, and everything to safety and security. We're trying to coordinate the entire efforts and respond to the interests and the concerns of the community and build those other detailed plans with the community.
A critical component of it, Heather, is just to show really people that it can all coexist harmoniously. And certainly last Monday, I think everybody, all the doubters, got a chance to see things running, maybe not as smoothly as, because this was the first, but certainly at a level where they are comfortable and reassured that this is something that we can go forward with.
Yes, I think it was such a great opportunity. I mean, we walked all around, and not just in the old town, even on the southern side where the beach is, the Black Sand Beach, because before in conversation we were like, well, we don't know if tourists would want to go there. And a lot of Port Royalists hang out there.
Yes.
And they said, well, this is where we hang out. And the people were there and they were really enjoying it. And I think it is now clearer what are some of the opportunities. There are things that you would think maybe visitors may not be interested in, only the community may be interested in that. And I think we are seeing great opportunities for community-driven spaces
Yes.
that would also be open and friendly to guests. So
Absolutely.
that's really one of the key things we're looking at in planning the community going forward.
Thank you so much. Well, viewers, you have a chance too to ask questions of our guests. I'm not leaving you out. Certainly you can send us a question on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, where we're streaming live. Let's get though to William Tatham, the man who is in charge of cruise shipping and marina operations. And I know if you could have cloned yourself last week, you would have. It was really very, very busy for you, and welcome so in Kingston, Jamaica. In terms of how the operations went last week, first of all, your perspective on that?
Exceeded all of our expectations. I mean, we were very confident on certain aspects of it, but I must be honest, it just completely exceeded our expectations. We have developed, I think, one of the most unique ports of call in the Caribbean, and it's very important that the people of Port Royal protect this, because one of the most extraordinary things that we observed, as Heather was saying, when you walked around Port Royal that day and saw through every little street, every little rum bar, everything, people were everywhere. That's not something that you see traditionally, for example, on our North Coastings. And when passengers were coming back, it was interesting to hear their opinions and stuff. And one of the things that they were saying was, this was so authentic, this was so real to us. Try and keep this because you've developed something special here. And then beyond that, Kingston, the areas that we heard people when they were returning that they had visited.
Yes.
You know,
Some
there
went
was
they went to Fort Clarence, they went all the way up to Blue Mountains.
Blue Mountains,
they went to
the
Devon
stadium,
House.
Emancipation Park, Devon House, Trenchtown.
Yes, the culture yard.
The
got
craft
a
market.
lot of
They went.
visitors.
It was just extraordinary. Well
Yes.
beyond some of the areas that we thought.
Yes.
And that was the first run. Now we better understand, and I think we're going to be able to even show more. And just we kept on waiting for the ship to say what had not say. Give us a negative. Nothing. Everything has
Wow.
been incredibly positive. The feedback.
Wow.
The cruise line was overwhelmed.
Fantastic. I have a question here from Paul on Facebook, and I'm going to extend his question because I see where he's going really. He says, how does the development of Port Royal benefit locals and not just the tourists? And I believe he's really talking about not just the benefit of persons within Port Royal, but certainly the wider Kingston metropolitan region as well. Doc, I'd have you take that.
Sure. Well, I think it's obvious that the people in Port Royal, from all that Heather and William have said, have benefited from this. But as William pointed out, our real objective in doing the cruise terminal at Port Royal was to also serve as an entree into Kingston.
Yes.
And they went to all of those locations that you've heard about, the crafts market. They did well. They went to Emancipation Park. They did well. The Jamaican community, the Kingston community, embraced the guests in a way that surpassed their expectations and, as William said, even our expectations. The benefit to the community is that those persons are going to be coming on a more frequent basis. They're going to be spending money in our community. They're going to be contributing in a variety of ways to the development of those communities. And so what we hope is that the warm embrace that they saw. You know, William and I listened to some tape on persons coming back to the ship, and they said
Yes.
these were like friends that we didn't know that we had,
Yes.
that embraced us in Kingston. And that's just a wonderful testament for Kingston. And if we can keep that going, to Paul's question, we think that economic benefits will flow in a very significant
And
way.
trickle down to the common man on the
Absolutely.
street.
Absolutely.
How many more cruise ships are expected?
For this year, we have 4 more cruise calls. As you know, Naomi, while we had a wonderful experience on the first ship call, we still have work to do at the terminal.
Yes.
We still have work to do at Fort Charles. We still have work to do in the town. So that we expect that the next one will be even better. And for these 4, we'll work out all the kinks. Next year, William can speak to the number of cruise calls, but what I can say is that from where I sit, the number will increase quite substantially.
Bookings are bumping up already.
Absolutely.
All right.
And
So we expect to exceed 4, William, by next year, certainly.
Next year we have 8.
Already?
Yes.
So it's already booked, and 2020
correct.
is not finished, so
No,
you'll be
and
taking
so-
bookings throughout
correct.
the year.
And what we knew
Wow.
when we embarked on this was it was important to get that first ship in. Because
Yes.
there are some cruise lines that are very conservative and they want to see somebody else going first.
Yes.
And the buzz after that first ship went in was quite extraordinary. We already had some of the agents contacting us and saying, look, can you send more information on the Seawalk? Can you do this? We'd already met a number of cruise lines that we know had an interest. And so they are now, I think we're just waiting for that first call, and then we're
Wow.
going to see further. And the variety is extraordinary. We have Club Med coming, we have Viking Cruises, which is a very high end. We have Marella returning. Marella, I think, sees this part of their long-term strategy. They were very pleased with how it went, and they've already indicated to us that they're looking to Port Royal as being a long-term strategy for them.
You know, William, for some people who don't fully understand the cruise shipping business and the travel industry, how difficult is it to get even a cruise ship to say, you know what, we need to put you on our destination listing when we're moving around?
It is. There's a number of challenges. I mean, we have, they weigh so much. It's all about a number of factors. The primary one's a time, speed, and distance. They want
Yes.
to put together an itinerary. How many of these ports can I hit in the period of time that I'm going to be out there sailing? What does that port have to offer? How can I make revenue? Cruise lines don't come in just for the sake of being nice. They're coming in because there's an opportunity for them to generate revenue as well
Yes.
on tours and so on. So there's a whole bunch of factors that go into that decision-making process.
And
we
clearly,
were-
Kingston now is meeting and
so
exceeding those.
it was. So the challenge that Kingston has always faced, and the south coast of Jamaica, is that the north coast of Jamaica works very well for itineraries because they're going to hit 4 ports of call and get back up to Florida or Texas or so on.
Right.
Once you come around Jamaica, it affects that whole timing of the basic 7-night itineraries.
Right.
So that posed an initial challenge. But if you deliver a first-class experience, then they find a way in which to work that into maybe longer itineraries and so on. And in a sense, that's what we've been able to do here.
Fantastic. Kudos to the team again. All right, I have another one on Facebook, I believe. Yes, it is. Courtney's asking, are there any plans for Victoria Pier?
Well, the Victoria Pier, and Heather may want to speak to some of this as well, but Victoria Pier is also has potential as a cruise destination. I pointed out earlier in the discussion, Naomi, the concerns that we have that were expressed in respect of Kingston. There
Yes.
are also some challenges with Victoria Pier which don't exist at Port Royal in terms of the conditions, the sea conditions,
Yes.
and also the physical infrastructure, the way it's laid out and so on in respect of being able to accommodate a cruise ship. All of these with time can be surmounted. What we want to do is to ensure that Port Royal is extremely successful. And then the next port of call in Kingston would probably be Victoria Pier. As it stands right now, guests are being channeled from Port Royal when they
Yes.
come into Kingston to do the culture tour and to
Yes.
do the history tour. They are passed through Victoria Pier so that the crafts market there and the people who are organized there to meet and support tourism benefit from the experience as well.
Yes. Heather, if you could touch on that as well in
Yeah,
terms
so
of integrating the
Victoria Pier is really an important part of the downtown waterfront
Yes.
development, and right at the end of that is the Victoria Craft Market.
Yes.
And Craft Market is indeed one of the stops that guests went to last week, Monday. So Victoria Pier to Craft Market and indeed all of the waterfront certainly have potential for even more development. And they are, I will just say as UDC, there are other developments planned for along the waterfront, so there are more exciting things happening there. But I think the potential for also connecting it certainly exists, and that's one of the things I think we'll be investigating over the long term. But Victoria Pier in itself, which is a property which we have leased, is quite lively, and it is certainly one of the key spots that people go to on the waterfront now. There are a variety of offerings there, and it really has been a big part of bringing back life to downtown, which I think is a big part of the appeal of downtown Kingston.
I just want to ask a question because a lot of people about my age would remember the ferry going across to Port Royal. Any chance of it coming back?
The ferry is certainly something we'd like to see returned, not just to go between Kingston and downtown Kingston and Port Royal, but also go over to Hellshire, Fort Clarence, Other part, the waterfront of Kingston
nice
is a wonderful
Yes.
harbor, and we'd love to see that happen. It requires some additional planning, Naomi. And secondly, we're very cognizant of the fact that we need to get the private sector involved in this process as well. So we'd like
Yes.
that certainly to be a public-private kind of engagement, and we'd love to see that happen by next year. That's our target. We hope we can meet it.
I think it can take off very well. All right, let me get back to some more questions from social media. Natalie is asking, and I think maybe Heather could take this one, in terms of training locals to ensure that they understand, customer service, so to speak. I'm prettying up the question, but she really is asking, what measures do you have in place for locals to not harass tourists?
Well, I will start off, but
Hereby saying
I will
customer
also
service.
let PAJ follow up, because there's quite a bit of, there's many levels of training, because with economic opportunities, there are a variety of opportunities. So there has been training that started from last year, which included training in for artisans in a variety of craft, batik, repoussé, and other kinds of art that was introduced through the Ministry of Culture. And that program, the first phase of that program went on last year, and the second phase is starting now. And so that has trained local artisans in the creation of really lovely, local, genuine and authentic craft from residents of Port Royal. There's also been training, which again, the PAJ team can speak about a little more, in being tour guides, tour guide training, and we've had the support of the Ministry of Tourism and its agencies in looking at that, and in looking at all of the programs that are required to support the community to transition into being a community that welcomes guests. But training would not only be limited there, so there's other training being considered as well, being planned, including there's ongoing training right now for food preparation, and sales related to that around food and food handlers permits and things like that. But then there's also a certain amount of entrepreneurship training that we'll be looking at as well. So a variety of things, because as opportunities open up, we want to be able to prepare people to maximize those opportunities.
Prof, before you jump in on that very question, I want to, if you could, answer for me, what were the projections for employment as well?
So the projections for employment are a bit varied, but certainly within Port Royal, we anticipated a significant uplift because of the craft, the component, because of the during the construction phase of this and the works that were done in improving the town. But also we anticipate that the bars and restaurants and so on will do well, and there will be an uplift in employment that will be associated with that. We anticipate that there will be work for those who are involved on the seaside of operations, the jetty operations, but in the interim, tours of the mangrove, tours of the quays and so on, which, provided people are properly certified, there will be opportunities for them. In Kingston, they vary quite substantially, and depending on the range of areas that people will go to. And we are, as William has said, we're using the opportunity for these first four to fully understand how the guests, what their preferences will be, so that we can maximize that.
So we're looking at a relatively significant uptick in terms of employment.
We think that the uplift will be quite significant.
And certainly revenue generation.
Revenue generation. And as the number of vessels that arrive in Kingston increase, that will make it even more sustainable for those who choose to pursue employment in these areas.
Indeed. So if you could then respond to that question concerning training.
Sure, and I just wanted to underline a part of what Heather was saying, because this project is not just about Port Authority and UDC. There are a number of other agencies that have contributed to that. So the Ministry of Culture has been a big supporter of this project. The Ministry of Culture views Port Royal as sort of their asset, because the Jamaica National Heritage Trust, because they view it as an entertainment destination, which is going to be an important part, and I'll speak to that about employment as well. The JBDC was very involved in the batik and the craft training that was occurring. Your caller, the person who asked the question, specifically asked about harassment, and TPDCO, which is one of the government tourism product development company, which is one of the Ministry of Tourism agencies, and ourselves have had a training program for some time focused on harassment within the tourism sector, and that was presented to all the people in Port Royal. Less so
Fantastic.
to Kingston, and that's where once we understand where they're going to be going in Kingston, we'll be able to develop on that. Beyond that, there was training in storytelling and tour guiding.
Storytelling and tour guiding.
The
Wow.
people of Port Royal have for a long time been involved in providing and telling stories and in
Yes.
guiding tours through Fort Charles and through the town. This was enhanced. Amina Blackwood Meeks came in and did some training with them. So they have a lot of stories to tell, and we are now thinking about how we can. This is their own indigenous stories. This is
Yes.
not just stories about the past and so on. It's about all the duppies that they see there and wonderful things that are unique to Port Royal. So they're going to be engaged in this
Some of them
process
will
as
probably transition to even Heroes Park in terms of hearing some of those stories.
That is correct. And I wanted to mention too that the way we have designed the terminal, Naomi, is quite different from the other terminals that we have. We want this to be not just a terminal which is used on cruise ship days. We want it to be able to be open to the public 7 days a week.
Yes.
We anticipate that there will be activities on the terminal. We expect that there will be activities associated with the terminal. We expect it to be an entertainment venue. And therefore, that's another wave of employment that we see being generated for the people of Port Royal and even in a wider area.
Yes, you actually segued nicely to the question I wanted to ask William, which is what are the facilities that will be on the pier itself, so much so that persons will be able to come there on a regular basis, whether or not there is a cruise ship?
Well, what we've done is we've created a terminal that opens itself to tremendous flexibility, because what we want to do is we want to encourage event managers, weddings, this sort of stuff to be able to come out there.
Weddings?
Yeah,
Right at the-
we think it's an
okay.
extraordinary location. It offers a lot. It's a stunning location to just stand and look across the harbour and so on. So we think it's a wonderful opportunity to for us to work with the private sector and try and host a number of events there. Because of that approach, what we've decided to do is not to create what we have done at other ports as a little shopping area and so on and so forth, because we wanted to keep that level of flexibility so that during each event or each happening, then we would be able to basically cater to the event that's going to be there.
All right. So I'm just getting the wrap-up signal from the crew. Can you imagine? It's really, really that time when we have to go. But in terms then of the future, in looking toward ensuring that this is not a 2-year project or 1 year, how sustainable and long-term are we looking to ensure that this stays, just like we have the ports on the North Coast that have been there for decades, ensuring that Port Royal is here to stay?
Well, if I can go first now, I think that the project that UDC, the Port Authority, the other agencies have been engaged in by the Office of the Prime Minister, and who is the Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation, is to create a project that's going to transform Port Royal and Kingston in a very special way. And so we see this not as a 1-year project, a short-term project. The port being put there is a catalyst for a number of other activities, some of which are currently being planned by the UDC, and we expect those to come on stream quickly. We certainly have other plans for the assets that we have in and around Port Royal, and we think that Jamaicans are going to be thrilled by what they will be able to see when they go back to Fort Charles. The last time you went was probably when you were sliding down the Giddy House.
Yes.
You'll be surprised that if you come in another month, what you'll see there. We have development plans for our lighthouse, which is close by at Plum Point. We have development plans for the assets that we have, the area that we have at Old Cold Wharf. So there are many other developments to come on stream now. It's not something that's going to die in a short while. We view Kingston as being one of the emerging ports. Today, the number of cruise ships that are being launched is greater than it has been in the history of the cruise business. So we anticipate that there will be more business coming. And we think Port Royal is going to fit a particular niche. There's only one Port Royal. There's only one Kingston. So we are very confident that this is going to be a long-term success for Kingston and Jamaica.
Indeed. You know, Heather Pinnock, let me tell you, I think all Jamaica is pleasantly and surprised and pleased that we've been able to ensure that there is a harmonious and seamless transition and transformation of this project, ensuring that the environment is at the forefront. And your team must be congratulated for that, because a lot of the times we hear the environmentalists coming out saying, boy, you know, make sure, and yet we haven't heard any major issues that have surfaced from this. So congratulations to you and your team. But in terms of then now looking long term, what are we looking at?
So long term, as I said, one of the things we really look at is developing the town with the community. So a big part of our strategy, I mean, from before and going forward, is having that participatory approach to the development and always getting feedback, always working with the community to move forward. But at the same time, looking at major projects. So beyond the port, we're looking at waterfront developments in the town. We're looking at attractions, a series of attractions. So Fort Charles is already being redeveloped. Looking at Lime Street, looking at the Old Naval Hospital, looking at how we bring those together into a formal tour, looking at also what are the other community facilities and things, and what are the other new opportunities for economic development. And of course, Prof mentioned it, as a part of the larger entertainment venue, one of the short-term things that we are working on right now, but which is likely to have an effect for the long term, is we're working very specifically with Ministry of Culture at Fort Rocky, which is the fort you reach before the town,
Yes.
to develop that into an entertainment venue.
Zone,
and I
yes.
believe we intend to press it into use as early as Reggae Month this year. So expect
Just a few days from
activities,
now.
and there will be activities and developments of all sorts. And I just want to reinforce that development is not only when you see things being built, but when projects are successful, as you say, when the environment is protected, when the economic opportunities continue. All of those are key parts of the sustainable development.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather. And finally, let me get to William. In terms of looking at that long term, but also let me just infuse one quick one from Facebook as well, especially given the global environment that we live in terms of health screenings and checks at the pier.
How do we do that?
Yes.
No ship can come in unless it's passed by health is the first entity that goes on the ship to ensure that it's passed. And we've had situations, not just a few months ago, where the largest ship in the world came into Montego Bay, and they came in and there was a virus on board, and we didn't allow it to land. So
yes.
We're very vigilant when it comes to that sort of stuff.
Fantastic. Great.
And very much on top of that.
And long term, in terms of your own vision and goal?
Oh, I think Prof kind of alluded to it. I think we all are looking, we talk a lot about the cruise ship aspect, but I think in reality, Port Royal is going to become a place for Jamaicans to go. This is going to be a place that you're going to want to go out on weekends and spend, because the amount of stuff that's going to be developed out there, and it's going to be always changing, and it's going to become so much more richer and entertaining, and I think it's going to be a wonderful place for locals. We're building, in a sense, we should be building it for the locals, and then the cruise lines come and enjoy it.
Indeed, yes,
and I think
indeed.
that's in fact, that was the message we got from some of those passengers.
Going to take a few people over there on the weekend.
Absolutely.
For sure. Thank you so much. I told you it was the dream team of development. Really and truly, I have them right here. Professor Gordon Shirley, the President and CEO of the Port Authority of Jamaica, Mrs. Heather Pinnock, the General Manager of the Urban Development Corporation, and Mr. William Tatham, the Vice President of Cruise Shipping and Marina Operations at the Port Authority of Jamaica. Thank you so much, and congratulations. Continue the hard work and good work for Jamaica. We really appreciate it. This has been OPM Connect. Join us next week for another interesting discussion.